I was not allowed to work straight into the business. So after I graduated from school, I had to work for other people. Didn't matter what the industry was or who it was, where it was, but I had to go and experience working for someone before I could come into the business. And my dad said the business will always be here. And whenever it's time for you to come in, I'll let you know.
Welcome to The Boost, a podcast for home service contractors. We explore leaders and innovators in home services, their personal journeys, thoughts, and experiences with growth, marketing, and succession. We cover the good, the bad, the ugly, and its ultimate impact. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here for another episode of The Boost. I'm Zach Wilson, Chief Marketing Officer of Local. Today we have Jessica Weaver, General Manager of Weaver Heating and Air. Jessica, thanks for being here. It took a minute, April or something?
Yeah, it was mid-April, I think.
Yeah, well, you can probably date it based on your firstborn. You said she's 11 months and she was, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, right?
She was 6 months, yeah, so it's flown by very fast as far as watching my child grow up.
When you're at that 2 month, 4 month, 6 month, it's like every couple months you're basically dealing with a new human being problem, especially in your firstborn.
Yes, we have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, exactly. Today, we're going to talk about your journey into the family business. You grew up as a daughter of a contractor, and now post undergrad, you've come back to the business and you're ready to embrace it. And I guess either carry on the tradition or make it into your own. So let's dig into it. You went to undergrad and you graduated. Congrats. Doot, 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 doot. Then what?
So my parents' rule whenever I got out of college, well, even towards the end of my college career, they said I was not allowed to work straight into the business. So after I graduated from school, I had to work for other people. Didn't matter what the industry was or who it was, where it was, but I had to go and experience working for someone before I could come into the business. And my dad said the business will always be here. And whenever it's time for you to come in, I'll let you know. So, right out of college, I worked for Georgia Power in corporate in downtown Atlanta for a year. That was fun until they wanted me to move to Macon. And I was 22 and really wasn't interested in moving to Macon.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. So I ended up moving back to Cartersville, selling my home in Atlanta, coming back to Cartersville and working for Shaw Industries for several years in different capacities, but learned a lot as well. And then I had this hankering that I thought that I wanted to be a coach and a teacher. So I actually went back to school, got my master's degree in education, and I was a high school math teacher for 2 years and a softball coach and a golf coach. And that was fun. It was interesting. I learned how to live with a little because that was 100% the case. I can't even imagine what life would be like if I was trying to live off of $1,800 a month. Fun times, learned a lot about people. Anyways, I chose to leave teaching after my second year, and I really didn't have a clue of what I was going to do. And my dad said, "Well, do you feel like you're ready to come into the business?" And I said, "I guess I could give it a shot." So I came into the business in September of 16. Actually, on my birthday was my hire date. So September 6th.
A lot to celebrate on that day then.
Right, right. So started then. I walked into a very unique situation in that we had a family member running our business that was not a sibling. And I was kind of fresh eyes, fresh ears, saw some things that were less than wonderful and started asking a lot of questions. And, anyways, fast forward, that individual was basically trying to run our business in the ground. Had to get rid of a bunch of folks that were working with us because it was all jaded and tarnished and whatever you want to call it.
Wow.
Internally, externally, we were basically like back to a startup in 16 because of all of the corruption that was going on.
Jesus, sounds like government. You sure you went to the right office?
I know, right?
This is Cartersville, not Atlanta, right?
Correct. Yes. So that was really tough, but we had to make some choices and we got rid of what we needed to do and started fresh. And I didn't really have a choice of a honeymoon period. I think everybody thought, oh, Rudy's daughter's going to come in and she's just going to collect a paycheck and not really do anything. And I didn't have that luxury. So I wore work boots and I had tools and I was out in the field. We roughed in houses. I was crawling in crawl spaces, 140-degree attics, itching like hell all day with installation and gut work. Cut my hands a few times, but I really value that because that was how I was able to build the team that I have today because I came in and I earned the respect from just pure hard work. So fast forward to now, I built my team off of finding good people, and a lot of them were talented in the industry already, but some of them had never been in the industry before, but they had I call it the fire in their belly to do great. And that's what I wanted on my team. So I have a phenomenal group of people that I work with every day. I don't say that I have people that work for me. I don't believe in that. I've been a part of a team my entire life. And the folks that I work with every single day, that they're the boots on the ground that make it happen for Weaver Heating and Air. And they wear that sense of pride like I do. That's my name on the side of the truck. And customer service is one of the top things for us, for sure. Our leading way of getting leads is referrals. That's because we've been here for 51 years and continued that legacy that my dad started. It's been a wild ride for 8 years for sure, but that's just construction. That's whether you're a plumber, HVAC, builder, whatever, kind of have to roll with the punches. And, of course, everybody's dealing with the workforce shortage, and it's not really the shortage of people, it's more of the shortage of people that want to work, which is disappointing.
Very different, two very different conversations for sure.
Yeah, but we could have a lot more employees than we do. We're around 12 right now that are W-2 employees, and then we have 6 install crews that are subcontractors that we use.
Okay.
We've been using them for the last 6 years. So, that was part of the people that I found to build us back up. So,
Gotcha. That's still the case now.
yes.
It's a good model, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're 1099. The great thing is that they're able to find work if they need it outside of us, but the majority of them, they work for us every day and works out great, and we make sure we take care of them, and they wear our shirts and hats and everything when they go out there, and it's just we pull everything per the job. So we scan everything out down to the PVC fittings, 2 pieces of solder that goes out with every job. It gets scanned out so we can job cost every single install that goes out the door.
Oh, wow.
A little over the top, but whenever you get scalded and someone does what they did to us back in 16, you're a little jaded on that.
I think a lot of people aspire to that anyway. It just becomes something that's of secondary importance rather than primary importance because they haven't been scalded by it. They haven't experienced what happens when they don't have those systems and those checks and balances in place. So, like a lot of problems you've experienced in the last 8 years, and I know I experienced them too on our end, but you can't solve every problem every single day without even knowing what the problem is. There's some problems that you don't even know exist and you can't solve them until you're confronted with them, right? And you
Right.
were confronted with this problem, so you rightfully adopted and implemented a solution to fix the problems.
We have one person who orders our equipment and parts and supplies. She's been with me for 5 years now. Prior to that, I was doing it, but setting the checks and balances has been key, and especially putting everything in place because my dad's retired now as far as from the business itself. He's no longer comes in, but my job is to report to him what's going on. I want to be able to show him in black and white where we're good at, where we're not good at, and be able to explain to him why we're not. If we're not performing in one area, why are we not performing in an area?
That's probably really interesting too. Kind of acts like a little mini board of directors, right? You have to be tight in terms of what you're saying. He's not in the day to day, so can really look at things much differently in a macro level vision rather than being in the trenches, which we all know. I mean, you know, too, when you're in the trenches, you miss a lot of stuff. You get into little nooks and crannies of the business that don't really matter as much as when you're looking from the sky, right? I think that sounds awesome. I mean, especially, and we can segue here. I already know the answer to this, but in terms of the succession and the succession plan and planning and where you are, whether this was part of that master plan or not, it sounds like it's a really good plan. And I think people could probably learn something from it.
It really has been great, but I'll tell you, it all starts with relationships. I love both of my parents equally. They're wonderful. But whenever it comes down to working with each other, I think my dad and I, we mesh much better than, say, my mom and I would, or whatever. Not for any reason. My dad and I are very much alike as far as how we think. We know how to communicate with each other. When we were working side by side daily, there would be some frustrating times and we would raise our voices or whatever, but we would have those moments. And then 5 minutes later, we're back to business as usual. So having short term memory loss is great. That's part of being successful. But my dad is such a patient person. And I'm sure I drove him crazy because whenever I came here, I literally had a black notebook. It stays in the top of my desk, but that's notes I took very early on. And then goals also that I, wanted. And I've been able to check those off a little at a time. Some are smaller or bigger than others, but ultimately having that and being able to go back and reflect on where I was almost 8 years ago to see where we are right now, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I bet. So let's go back to the start and when you came in, recapping here, but you came in with the intent was really just to test the waters, right? Your dad wanted to see if you liked the business. You wanted to see if you liked the business. And how long did it take you after being in 130-degree attics and being all itchy all the time before you figured out you liked this?
That was a real solid 2 years that I was definitely out there every day, and then slowly but surely, I was getting a little bit further away from that, but I don't mind that. I've never been a sit at a desk all day kind of person anyway, so it worked out to be able to be in and out, but there was a point where I recognized, if we're gonna take the next steps, we've gotta have the team in place for me to be able to work on the business and not in the business. And that was something that my dad and I are very different. He was very much in the business kind of person. I mean, he wanted to be in the nooks and crannies of every aspect of what was going on in the field. And it's not that I don't know what's going on in the field, but that's the reason why I have people on my payroll that have that job title and that job description. And then, of course, we meet once a week for me to get a recap of kind of what's going on in the field. So definitely been a transition as far as that goes, but I've got people in place. I know where our pricing's at. I've got somebody watching that constantly and if something changes. Of course, we're meeting about it. We've got an email about it. I've got Google spreadsheets that I work on outside of our operating system because I just think it's another way to have checks and balances. I feel like that if everything is streamlined into one source, that it could potentially be manipulated. If I'm keeping it separately, then I've got something to almost check it with.
You were scalded bad. Redundancies upon redundancies upon redundancies.
I do, but I'm good with that.
One day I will be willing to bet you'll be over it or it'll be someone else's job. So, all of those things, I guess what's interesting to me is this you starting to make your mark on the business. You said your dad was in the business guy, you're on the business gal, right? So, those are very different. Do you consider these new practices and these new processes and people, personnel, right? You talked a bunch about new people that you've added in different roles as part of basically restructuring your org chart or redefining your org chart and coming up with, I don't know, maybe you were very tech and install heavy and no middle management, and now you're a little bit more balanced. I'm guessing, but it sounds to me that's like what you've done. So could you elaborate on that?
Adding that layer of middle management has been the key for real. Prior to that, that was not a thing. I mean, they would be hired, but dad would be like, I think I'm going to jump in. I told him he was like the hokey pokey, jump in, jump out, as far as the management style. If you're going to stay in, stay in. But if you're going to stay out of it, then stay completely out of it. So that's definitely the mark that I'm trying to leave, I guess, is my legacy. I want to be someone who's working on the business and continuing to hire the great people in the middle management roles and the people that are, the frontline defense, as I like to say, the boots on the ground, which is your techs, your installers, your dispatch, CSRs, that kind of thing. What I do is I now look at the numbers after they've been reconciled for the previous month. I am looking at the calls from the day before, and I keep up with our job costing, our installs once a week. So the other big role that I have is I'm very involved in our Chamber of Commerce here in our community with our schools. I'm on the Development Authority Board. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce Directors Board. I am very much community driven. Not only am I working in the business, but I am the face of our company. That's another big role that I play, being out and about.
Are you going to replace the beaver?
I'm sorry.
Are you going to replace the beaver? The being the face?
Yeah, I'm gonna put my face on the beaver body. No, the beaver is like something that we came up with a couple years ago that was just something funny. And the next thing we know, it just kind of took off. The Leave It to Weaver slogan, we've literally had that slogan for 30 years now, but the beaver was something new and it's been a hit. We went into a fourth grade career day at the end of school last year. The kids saw our logo and there wasn't a beaver anywhere. And they were like, that's the Weaver Beaver.
That's good. I will say that's good marketing and good branding, and that I would argue that's a probably a testament to your community touch and your community level involvement, right? That's how you penetrate elementary school kids.
We came up with a heating and air activity book and everything. Color the service tech beaver. The Weaver beaver is trying to get to a service call. Color your own service tech van. Had some Q&A and some interesting facts about HVAC in it. That was a huge hit.
Yeah, that's great. That's some awesome outside the box thinking for sure. Kudos to whoever came up with that or whatever team came up with that.
Skylar is my right hand and my left hand and my feet. She's my go-to and she takes my crazy ideas and brings them to life. She has the programs on her computer and she does a lot everyday stuff as far as our installing and everything is coordinating it. But when we have a little free time, she's designing and
Oh, really? That's great. Good to have someone like that around. You can run with those ideas and implement them quickly. So that's awesome. Going back to the, I guess, 2 years into this and you're liking the business, at what point did you and your dad or your dad approach you and you guys decide that we're going to have an actual succession or you want to take over the business or you want to replace your dad in the business or he wants to sell it to you, whatever that conversation was?
I loved taking the opportunity to help people in the industry, but also it allowed me to have the community involvement. I fell in love with it, and heating and air was just kind of the catalyst that allowed me to do the community work. But we sat down and he asked me if I was serious about this. I'm like, absolutely. But my dad was like, well, you got to get your HVAC license. So at 2 years in, I still had 3 more years of basically apprenticeship that I had to do. I'd been in the field. I needed to be in the service. Then I needed to be a manager, mid manager, and then GM. It was a quicker pace than some. But once I was able to take my HVAC exam in February of 22, he was like, okay, I think you got this.
Did he hold the license before?
Yeah.
Oh, he did. Okay, gotcha.
That was a big day because I don't know how familiar you are with taking the conditioned air license test, but it is not an easy test. It's not an easy process. It's stressful, but definitely rewarding whenever you get that piece of paper that said you passed.
Yeah, well, that's interesting too because you were traditionally schooled, right? You did baseline school, then you went to undergrad, you were an athlete. And so emphasizing the demands that were required for that test, given what you went through, and I understand this tremendously because I was as well. And the demands on time in terms of when you're at school and athletics and succeeding in that arena are real. There's not a lot of time for much of anything. And so that's interesting to hear knowing your background. I guess so we're at what is it, 2022, you passed the test. So did he have like a succession plan formally done? Did you step into a succession plan? How did that all come to life?
So we started out with just a conversation, obviously, with the two of us. And then we went to a local attorney and sat down and drew it up and put everything in place as far as how it was going to legally go down and make sure that our accountant knew. And so it grows by 10% each year for the first 6 years. But we talked about it beforehand and then we just met with a local attorney that we use a lot for different things and made it official.
Is each year, is it just to put this into plain terms, right? So each year you're buying another 10%, right? And are you the financing of that 10%? Is that a seller finance? Does that come out of distributions? Do you have some sort of another small business loan to finance those payouts?
It's really just earning the percentage. There's not any money switching hands.
Okay. So there is no formal purchasing of that. It's literally just changing hands 10%. Was there any significance behind the 10% a year? Did your dad wanted to be in the business for 6 more years
And make sure that I would stay in the course and doing things right. I mean, it was just kind of his way
rather
of
than handing you all 60 at one time or 2 years or something? It was just his way of kind of trustfully handing it off?
yeah.
That's interesting. I've heard different things too, where it's 1 or 2% and takes literally your entire life. So you talked about we'll get to 60% in another couple years, right? You're 4 years in. You've got 2 more years before you get to the 60%. And then we had talked about this offline a little bit, but that your dad had designed it, or was this at the request of the attorney? I don't know. After 6 years to come in and renegotiate the last 40%.
That was my dad.
Oh, that was your dad? Just fast forwarding 2 years, I mean, you have no idea what the next 40% is gonna look like, whether it's gonna be another succession just like this or some other sort of seller, maybe seller financed, right? You have no idea basically at this point in time.
No, I don't, but I have confidence in it. Like I said, we have a great relationship. The only other person that would be involved, God forbid, if something did happen to my dad, would be my mom, which we have a great relationship. And like I said, a lot of times you hear about family HVAC businesses having uncles and brothers and cousins and all kinds of stuff, people in the business thinking they need their piece of the pie. But thankfully, my dad bought his brother out in 17, I think, maybe they had been in this business together for over 40 years, but he ended up buying his brother out, which his brother's now passed on. So we don't have to deal with any other family members. It's my parents and I. Like I said, I take care of them. They've taken care of me. There's no animosity or, you know what I'm saying? Money can change people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Big time.
That's something that we've been very fortunate that we don't have to deal with egos and attitudes and everything else.
It definitely makes it easier, and it's great to hear that exists, and it will make it easier. Personally, I can see it every which way, one of which is I could also argue that just a traditional, and this is something that I think is important to talk about because a lot of people don't realize this. Your succession, I think, is what a lot of people interpret a family succession to be, which is your equity is changing hands, but in a way that isn't going through a standard purchase or selling process where you're getting a valuation on the business. Each piece of the 100% has a value. This is changing hands in a different way. And it's totally cool and it's totally fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think what happens with people is that they also think that's the only way that you can have a succession in a business is by quote unquote handing things over, right? Or having this type of succession plan. Whereas, which I think I'm just hypothesizing here, is that why people go to the private markets, right? Private equity. And instead of just in the instance of your family, instead of your dad approaching you and saying, "Hey, Jess, you interested in this? You want to do this?" Where he's just like, "Oh, I'll just go out to the private market and can make tons of money on the business or whatever, or here's my retirement," and not even include you. But the other side of it is, and maybe this will happen in the last 40% for you guys, whatever you guys agree to, is that you can come to the table and your dad can say, okay, well, the business is now worth X, whatever, a dollar or $10 million, whatever the number is, doesn't matter. And I want to shed that last 40%. Let's go to evaluation and you pay me X for this last 40% of the business. Again, there's nothing wrong with that either, because what happens there is just a business transaction, right? He's worked his whole life on the business, built something, and it's his choice how he wants to leave that legacy, whether he wants to hand it over to kin, which is obviously what he's doing, or sell it to kin or sell it to the private markets, but whatever, that's your choice. But something that just gets glossed over, you can still have a lucrative or very lucrative or whatever financial exit of a business and keep it in your family. Those things are not mutually exclusive. And I think what people don't understand right now is that with the private markets chomping at the bit to buy these businesses, that they just think, well, if my business is worth 8x my EBITDA evaluation, then I can't get that anywhere else but in private equity. It's like, well, they're willing to pay that, then someone in your family and they have the means, they can pay it and you can still keep it in your family. There's no reason you have to hand it over to private equity or some sort of platform or your competitor, right? There's a lot of ways to sell your business and be very creative about keeping it within the family. So I think it will be very interesting to hear what happens to you guys in a couple years if it continues on this path or changes direction or whatever. But that's just something that I was kind of curious about in terms of exploring. Like as a parent, you just don't know. Is your kid going to be interested in, like me, like a marketing business and whenever, God, they're like 20 years out. Like, who knows, right? Like, my wife is a great example. I love this story. Her and her sister were, I don't know, late teens, maybe mid college, and their dad was a local general dentist in the community, very active. And he's like, all right, girls, it's time. Last chance. Do you want to be a dentist? Both of them are like, absolutely not. All right, well, I'm ready to start my succession planning and you're not part of it. There's nothing wrong with that either. And this is a good segue to your brother. You mentioned there is no other family involved, and there isn't, but there is sort of, but they're not interested. I mean, you said he just left active service or something, right? So just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he actually worked in the business growing up.
It's probably why he doesn't want to come back, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He worked in his early 20s, mid 20s here and there, but he had a passion for Army National Guard. And then he has been a helicopter mechanic for the federal government for 20 years. So he loved it. It was very structured. That's just kind of how he thinks. Yeah, he's a phenomenal human being, but we are two opposite people as far as we go through our day to day. He's retired and he still does not have any interest in coming back. And I told him, I said, I'm not really sure who is the smarter one here, me or you, because he's already drawing one retirement. So
Yeah, right, right, right.
what's the next step? What's his new identity going to be going on for the next 20 years? So
Yeah, yeah, and maybe somewhere down the road, he'll have a burning passion to, come back and get involved. I mean, who knows? Things change. I was visiting outside of Dallas, visiting a shop, and a friend got into his business, bought another business, and brought in his dad. And his dad literally is the GM now. It's the opposite. Seeing them around the shop is just remarkable. Like his dad has like just tremendous respect for him, and you can see it in how they interact and how he does his job and is very detailed. They're so respectful for each other, and and everybody is unique in this way. It's like I could never do this. It's cool. I think it's what makes it fun and what makes it interesting. So I guess just jumping into it a little bit deeper with where you've gone in your journey in the succession, taking the reins and working through the ranks and now becoming GM and ultimately, as you said, eventually becoming president at some point in time, we hope. Is there anything that, is just like, this was terrible, I would have done this totally differently in terms of where you're at right now that you could maybe shed some insight on for anyone going through this?
I really don't know that I would change much about my journey. I'm very thankful that my parents made me work for other people first. I think that was the core portion of my journey and how I got here because I didn't grow up having a summer job, bagging groceries or working at a local store somewhere during the summers. I played ball. That was my life, was ball and school. Where I say some people got a little bit of a different experience than me. They kind of found out what they liked, what they didn't like in a career way earlier. I didn't really have that. I would say I spent the majority of my 20s trying to figure out who I really was and what I wanted to be past school and ball because that's really what I had known my entire life. I'm thankful for those years after college to be able to find out management styles I like. I had good managers, I had bad managers. I had great work environments, I had terrible work environments. So I met nice people, mean people, all in between. It was really, really great to gain that wisdom and knowledge through those experiences and jobs that maybe I went to and I didn't think necessarily it would be my career, but it was something worth trying and, it was great opportunities. I met a lot of great people along the way. My first boss at Georgia Power, I still talk to today. I go to tech games and I've been to some Braves games with him because he's just continued to climb up the ladder at Georgia Power as well. But I don't know that I would necessarily change my journey. And honestly, even what I walked into, which was terrible, I think it's helped me build me to who I am today. And not to be cliche or anything like that, but that kind of stuff could have happened after I got here. It could be happening now if I didn't have that experience. I came in pretty much wide eyed and knew what to watch for from the beginning versus someone pulling the wool over my eyes after the fact, I guess, if that makes sense.
You attribute that to, I mean, George Power is obviously a massive company, right? Being in a company that was a big, large enterprise with lots of structure, lots of checks and balances, lots of redundancies, et cetera.
Yeah, that was helpful for sure. Shaw too. I was at Shaw Industries for 4 years, I think.
What's Shaw?
Carpet,
Oh, carpet. Okay. Interesting.
hardwood. I mean, they've got all kinds of flooring, but
Are they a manufacturer? Yeah.
yeah,
Is it regional or national?
it's national.
It's national. Okay. Like a lot of people probably have Shaw carpet in their house type of thing.
Yeah, probably. Mohawk is another local company. Yeah, Shaw originated in Dalton, but it's all over the United States now. And but anyways, yeah, it's of course. I mean, I took a major pay cut whenever I left the corporate world to go teach at a private school.
As most people do.
Yes,
It's
an experience on its own.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, teaching is not known for its lucrative pay. It's definitely a giving and a passion job, not a performance pay job.
I left Shaw and told my dad that I was going into teaching. He told me that I was the dumbest SOB he had ever met. I got to deal with that for 2 years.
I don't know your dad intimately, but I have heard him heckle and bark from very far away, so I can hear that.
Yes. Yes.
One clarification, because you busted my chops over it too, for any non-Southerners that listen to this, is when Jess refers to balling, it was softballing and not another ball sport like volleyball or basketball. When we first met, I was like, I have no idea what you're saying. And she just kept saying, balling, like said it like 20 times. And I was like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, we don't do that. We don't say that up here. It's just not something, it's not an up north thing. It's a down south thing. To be clear, Jessica played softball her entire life. Actually, I don't know this. Were you catcher?
Yes. Catching, pitching, and playing shortstop, but I was a catcher in college.
Is that you? Are you at the plate batting or catching over your left shoulder?
That's a picture of me catching. That's from my freshman year at Tech.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But is there a batter in the picture too? Okay. Yeah. I couldn't see the other edge of the frame. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for being here and sharing the journey. We wish you the best of luck in coming years and completing the journey and the succession of Weaver Heating and Air. Yeah. So appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm glad we got to make this happen. I'm sorry. It's been a wild few months. Thankfully, we had a very hot summer down here in Georgia. So I was very excited about that. I don't listen to anybody's griping about the weather because I'm like, feels like money outside. That's what I tell them.
In home services, some people I follow, they regularly say, I know I shouldn't be wishing for, this event. If you're plumbing, it's like flooding. If you're in roofing, it's hail. If you're in HVAC, it's really crappy units and super hot or cold weather. And it's like, I feel bad wishing for these things.
Yeah, this is what puts food on my table. So,
Yeah, exactly. It is what it is. It's okay. You can do your heat and your snow dances and not feel too guilty about it. It's all good. Everybody else out there, go get them. Best of luck.